Good day. I'm Mark Geschke, Managing Director of SpaceAge Technologies in South Africa. Today I would like to talk to you about the journey to relevant IT and why we should pause before making serious IT investments. Over the last few years, IT has really become exciting again. We are now frequently referring to relatively recent concepts such as moving to the cloud, bring your own device, big data, and various other much hyped terms. But all of this excitement comes with a tremendous risk, and the question that I would like to ask you today is the following. What is going to prevent businesses from yet again spending huge amounts of money on IT projects, only to again to be bitterly disappointed when the expected returns don't materialize? We were first alerted to the fact that something was amiss when many business people started saying that IT in general doesn't add enough business value relative to its cost, even though we, as IT staff, providers, and everybody working in the IT industry work our proverbial butts off and believe that our work is highly valuable. When looking a bit deeper, we discovered that business leaders are not the only unhappy group, however, but that there's growing discontent amongst most people working in IT departments, vendors, suppliers. In short, it turns out that virtually everybody either working with or in IT is increasingly frustrated with the status quo. This is especially true for people working in small and medium businesses. There seems to be something fundamentally wrong with how we view and deliver IT services. IT seems to be broken. 2 years ago, we decided the stakes were high enough to try and get to the bottom of this conundrum, and to not only try and find the root cause for all these problems, but to also determine a credible vision for the future of IT that would be beneficial to all the various stakeholders. By no measure an easy undertaking. Our research started with a 10-day trip to Israel to work with some leading theory of constraints experts to sharpen our ability to think clearly, and thereafter included numerous individual fact-finding sessions, lots of theoretical research, and countless hours of deep discussions to understand the true cause and effect of what we were observing. Today, I would like to share this research conducted over the last 2 years and provide a high-level overview of what needs to be done to overcome the systemic IT problems we see all around us. We have called this generic approach relevant IT. Although SpaceAge, my organization, is well on its way of developing and fine-tuning marketable products around these insights, the research and its findings are very generic and should apply directly to most small and medium businesses. Before we start, however, we need to first understand and answer for ourselves a fundamental question, and that is, can IT really create value? Now, I've put some icons of some of the big organizations out there that have truly used IT to generate value. I could zoom in into some of those, but I'm sure all of you have some stories that you can relate when looking at some of these big names. So it's very clear to us that IT can create value, but can IT create value for a small and medium business? And when looking at it a little bit deeper and talking to individuals, we generally found the following sentiment, and we've summarized for effect. Although we believe, the business leader believe, IT could add significant business value, we just don't believe it to be true for our business. And even more sinister, have virtually given up trying to get it. Now this is a very, very strong statement. So it's very clear IT can add value to big business, but small businesses struggle to realize that value. Now, like any true engineer, and especially people in the IT industry that like to understand cause and effect and find the root cause of a problem, we are no different. So instead of looking at this particular problem in isolation, we decided, well, if so many people are complaining about the value that IT delivers, why don't we just try and find what all these symptoms are, all these complaints, and determine whether we can actually find the root cause contributing to all of these problems. So our research led us to talk to many people, and I would now like to present you with a list of summarized complaints we hear time and again. While going through, I would like to challenge you. If you're a business person, and I'm going to do the same just now for the technical people, but if you're a business person, and I go through this list of complaints, just ask yourself the question on whether 70% or more of these complaints also hold true for your organization. If the answer is yes, this research applies directly to you. If the answer is no, most of the research may still apply to you, but you need to be much more careful and look at the conclusions drawn. So let me start. Firstly, many investment and operational IT decisions do not advance business goals and sometimes even imperil them. This is just the previous concern that we started with highlighted. There is increasing pressure to spend more money in IT infrastructure upkeep. There is high IT staff turnover, and even if you may not see it, you're very well aware of the fact that many small businesses complain about this. Business is often unaware of transformative IT opportunities. They just don't know. Service levels are inconsistent, sometimes good and sometimes bad, usually depending on who delivers the service. Perception of business value of IT diminishes over time. IT increasingly struggles, takes longer and longer to deliver on business needs. And then lastly, IT people have become known as the no guys, causing immense frustration to business leaders that expect to move fast. So the question to you, looking through these lists of complaints or undesirable effects as we call them in theory of constraint speak, do 70% or more of those complaints apply to your organization? If yes, this research is relevant to you. Let's look at the complaints from the IT perspective, from the technical perspective, and do exactly the same as we've just now done for the business people. IT struggles tremendously to keep up with increasingly complex IT environments and user needs. It seems to many like a losing battle. Established processes are bypassed to get better service, mostly by business people that want answers now. IT service priorities frequently change at short notice. Doesn't matter how IT people plan, somebody always has a different idea on what needs to be done now. IT is often unaware of the needs of the business because nobody talks to them about business requirements. The IT services backlog grows continuously. It just seems like so much work. Most IT people feel completely overworked, underappreciated, and demotivated. A really, really big one. There is high IT staff turnover. If you have to work in an IT department and people around you are resigning and you have to take over from where they left off, this can be serious complaint. IT-related risks to the business are increasing at a rapid pace. We just know security is not, it's a moving target to secure your network properly. Now, to show you that this problem or root cause that we're trying to find is not only related to the business people of small and medium businesses and the technical people working in IT for small and medium business, but that many of the vendors out there have complaints of their own and they're really frustrated. Let me just quickly go through a list of the complaints that we frequently hear from IT vendors. Firstly, customers are more and more suspicious of recommendations made by IT consultants. Secondly, IT consultants have to work harder and harder for every successful engagement. IT consultants struggle to stay up to date with rapidly changing technology options and sometimes even look incompetent in front of customers. There is often little to differentiate IT services offerings, although all vendors claim to be the best. Just trust me. All customers seem to talk about these days is to control IT cost. Why don't they inquire more about value? And then lastly, running a successful IT consulting business has become increasingly difficult. Now, these complaints form part of a larger set of complaints that we collected from many, many different people out there. And the next step we had done in our analysis is to try and put them together into something which we call a cause and effect diagram. In the theory of constraint speak, this would be called a current reality tree. Now, how this works is pretty simple. We believe that we are analyzing a system, and in this system we know about many things that go wrong. These are the complaints. But we also know that generally when trying to find generic or systemic problems, that there are one or two or three bottom level problems that really contribute many of the other problems that we see. So a cause and effect diagram, you see at the bottom a specific effect, and this may lead to other effects. Now, there may be other reasons for these other effects to also appear, but what we are interested in is how all the negative effects support each other. Now, with this analysis and understanding of where the root problem is, we may have a chance of actually addressing the root problem. So I would like to show you this diagram. It's a little bit difficult to see. So what I would like to do is zoom in a little bit more and talk about some of those components. So at the bottom right, you see the many investment and IT operational decisions do not advance business goals and sometimes even imperil them. Now, just a quick note here. I'm not trying to point fingers to anybody. We see this effect not because we are not trying to make good IT decisions, but because of some other reasons, and we'll go into that a little bit later. So the effect is many of the IT decisions turn out to not be good after a while. So if that happens, it is reasonable to assume that the perception of business value of IT will diminish over time. So if IT decisions are being made and it turns out that many of them are not optimal for the business leaders will start questioning the value of IT. Now, if business leaders question the value of IT, are they still going to discuss all their needs with IT people? Or are we going to see this complaint that IT is often unaware of the needs of the business? Now, what happens if IT is unaware of the business? Quite simply, we see a negative feedback loop developing where IT being less aware of what goes on in the business again causes IT to make even worse business decisions. If they make even worse business decisions, the perception of the business value of IT will even further decrease, and we have a very devastating negative feedback loop. I would like to show you how the perception of business value of IT diminishes over time causes another effect, and that is that IT people will often not feel appreciated. So if business people don't see the value of IT, it means they're not going to spend a lot of time on IT, which means that IT people will just don't feel liked. So if they don't feel liked or appreciated in the business context, it's quite easy to see how they will become demotivated. Now, if they're demotivated, we may see some of them leaving the business because, let's face it, nobody wants to come to work and not like what it's doing. Now, if IT people leave, meaning there's high IT staff turnover, it's easy to see how this can contribute towards the IT-related risks to the business that are increasing. If people that really know your IT environment well are leaving, it's obvious that the risks to your business are increasing. As they're leaving, it's easy to see why there would be increasing pressure to spend more money on IT infrastructure upkeep, because you try to make your infrastructure more and more independent of your IT people. Now, having looked through all of that, I would like to go back again to where we started with at the bottom. And this is what we call a critical problem, because it sits at the bottom of all these effects. And this is what we already talked about before, that many investment and operational IT decisions do not advance business goals and sometimes even imperil them. So one way for us to address this would be to just run off and try and make better decisions. But if it was that easy, as already alluded to before, we would have already done so. So what is trying to prevent us from making better operational IT decisions? Now, at this point in time, I would like to sketch you a scenario, and that is of a river flowing into the sea. Unfortunately, where the river flows into the sea, there's a little bit of an area, sort of almost like an estuary area, and we see that fish are dying, or fish are dead. They are on the surface of the water. We see the water is brown. We smell something. The grass, the greens are not really green. It just looks bad. Something is wrong. Now, one way to approach this problem, as we so often do in real life, is we could go out and try and replace the fish, put in some alive fish, replace the plants, filter the water to get the smell out, to get the color right. But do you really think that this is going to help us much if we have not first gone upstream to find the factory that is polluting the water in the first place, shut down the factory, or do something with the gases, with the water, toxic waste materials that come into the river, and then only go downstream and try and manage the symptoms? Now, this analogy is exactly what we should try in solving this problem. Instead of trying to go to all the individual effects, we need to first try and understand what causes this critical problem. And once we have achieved this outcome, essentially once we've turned this into a desired effect, where we can say that many of our investment and operational IT decisions are actually starting to turn out to be good, then we will start seeing some positive effects where the complaints that were previously mentioned will either go away completely or just become less severe, giving us a chance to effectively eliminate them. So let's try and find out why many investment and operational IT decisions do not advance business goals. For this, I would like to introduce the concept of a core conflict. Now, the core conflict is a theory of constraints tool that allows us to understand the underlying conflict below a critical problem. Once we understand this conflict and the reason for why we cannot actually resolve this problem, we have a chance of actually moving ahead. So let's start with the beginning. The goal of an IT department is to contribute to business success. I'm sure we can all agree on this. In order for IT to contribute to business success, IT has to deliver a reliable and cost-effective IT platform. So far, it should all be clear to everybody. Now comes the next step. In order to have a reliable and cost-effective IT platform, we have to manage IT as a cost center. And the reason why we have to do that is because all IT decisions are made based on trust. Let's just digest that a little bit. So we need a reliable and effective IT infrastructure. So we know that's a technical requirement. But we also know that from a platform point of view, from an infrastructure point of view, there are no known good methods to argue for why certain IT investment or operational decisions are necessary. So we have to trust people out there that come forward and say, I believe you need the following because of these reasons. But because there's no objective way to compare different recommendations, it boils down to trust. Now, what does a business do if somebody comes to them and says, you have to trust me, and they know they have no alternative? They create an alternative. And the only alternative that they can find is to say, well, let me look at the costs, because the costs at least I can control. I have mechanisms to manage cost. So IT is becoming a cost center, and IT is being managed as a cost center. Now on the other side, we have the need of IT adding value. That's another significant business need. We want our IT department to add value. But we also know that in order for the IT department to add value, we cannot manage IT as a cost center. So we need to manage IT as a value driver, because we believe IT is a significant business enabler. So, this is now where the conflict is starting to come out. Can you see that in order to satisfy these two very important business needs, we are being forced into following two different management paradigms? And these two management paradigms currently cannot coexist. So we either follow the one paradigm or the other one, and often have to do so interchangeably, causing us to make many suboptimal decisions. Let's understand this conflict a little bit better. On the left-hand side, we generally find the technical people that are responsible for providing reliable and cost-effective IT platforms. On the right-hand side, we either have senior IT people that are business-driven IT people, so something like a CIO, strategic IT person. But very often it's the business people because they understand the business and they want value from the IT. They think in terms of strategies and business outcomes. How can I make more money? How can I reduce costs? How can I increase efficiencies? Whereas on the left-hand side, the technical people, they think about products and services. They think about features. The business thinks about value. So now we have the dreaded business IT divide. And we start seeing why we have this divide. And even though the industry has known about this for quite some time, because we could not so far eliminate the conflict, we started driving ourselves even further apart instead of getting closer together. This divide is much more severe now, 5 years later, than when we first started identifying it as a real problem. Now it's quite interesting that we talk about a divide because it's assumed that everybody in the business, all the other supporting functions have similar problems to complain about, but it's not. We don't talk about the HR divide. We don't talk about the finance divide. They're all part of the business decision-making process. Yet we talk about the IT divide. And the reason why we have the IT divide is because we so far have not been able to resolve the conflict. And we cannot find ways to manage IT as a value driver and manage IT as a cost center at the same time. So let me use an example. Business wants to implement mechanisms to generate more customers, to obtain new customers. And in fact, all of us have that need. We need more customers. We need to get more value from existing customers. When they go with that need to IT thinks about, okay, well, how can I translate that into product speak? And they think, wow, CRM, customer relationship management, that's the solution to your problem. So they go about and tell business and says, to reach your strategy, you need to implement customer relationship management. It's a tool that's going to allow you to do all these great things. So they implement CRM. And what happens to many CRM projects? They seriously fail the business, and business still doesn't get new customers. Why? Because there's this divide. So in order to understand this divide better and the reasons for this divide, we need to try and understand what are the challenges behind this conflict. And if we understand those challenges, we have a chance of moving forward to try and overcome those challenges, and over time move these two separate components or management paradigms closer together until they in the end overlap and give us both a reliable and cost-effective IT platform as well as add value. So the first challenge that I would like to introduce to you is the mindset challenge, where many SME business leaders view IT in a purely supporting role and only rarely include it in strategic planning activities. If that happens, if business already sees IT in a supporting role, we see business leaders on the right-hand side, we see IT on the left-hand side. So by design, we have the divide. Secondly, the focus challenge. IT leaders, especially true for small and medium businesses, are expected to wear many hats and usually have a strong bias towards the more technical or operational sides. So if a person that needs to run IT comes through the IT ranks, is not yet on the strategic level the business needs in order to make value-based decisions, and this person is expected to both do all the operational work as well as the strategic work, what is this person going to do on a day-to-day basis? Of course, this person is going to run IT work within the cost constraints, and make sure that the business has a reliable and cost-effective IT platform, and tell the rest of the business that in order to generate value, they need to come up with value-generating opportunities. The third challenge, and the reason why this divide exists, is because of the complexity. Let's face it, there is no easy mechanism to make good IT decisions. Good IT decision making is extremely complex due to the rapid pace of innovation, the multitude of dimensions to always consider, as well as a lack of effective decision making tools. It is incredibly complex, and even very, very good and experienced people struggle to make good long-term decisions. The fourth challenge, I would like to dab the no alternatives challenge, where we are not aware of any management approach that could achieve both reliable, cost-effective IT platforms as well as add business value. Just imagine this. If we had a mechanism whereby we could get away from managing IT as a cost center or managing IT as a value driver, and could really manage IT holistically to achieve both these needs, we would not have a conflict and we would consistently make good IT decisions. Now that I've shown you the main reasons for this divide, let me try and make some suggestions on how we can get out of it. But for this to work, we have to have a common starting point. And this is where you see this green block at the bottom, which we call the foundational belief. Where within your business, there has to be a strong belief that IT could contribute in a significant way to better business performance if these business leaders only knew how, which means they have to give IT the benefit of the doubt. There are some businesses where IT is just not that important. You need to ask yourselves the question, do you truly believe whether IT can make a difference in your business? If you do, you have these 4 challenges, and we can address them one by one. To overcome the mindset challenge where IT is seen only in supporting role, we have to implement strategic IT, or at least we have to start implementing strategic IT where planning and execution happens at the highest business levels. Essentially, we have to move from a technology-focused approach to a business-focused IT approach. Now you can start early. You can now immediately look at whoever runs your IT, doesn't matter the level of person you have, and allow that person to sit in critical business planning sessions. Now even if this person only sits in the back of the room, does not say a word, but then raises his hands if he or she hears that something is being discussed that is technically not feasible. How often have I been in situations where business makes a critical decision, assuming that IT can deliver, only to later on hear that either it's too expensive, or it would take too much time, or it's not even feasible, technically speaking, at all, putting the business plans in complete disarray. To overcome the focus challenge where the IT leader has to wear too many hats, we have to invest in organizational IT maturity and cultivate or seek senior level business IT expertise and support this expertise appropriately. And this all has to happen within SME budgets. Now, one way would be, instead of trying to appoint people for all the different roles that are required to run an effective IT organization, to try and gain the input of external providers that could sell you perhaps a couple of consulting hours per month, per year, whatever the mechanism is, to help you make better IT decisions and to remove the conflict for your internal IT. To overcome the complexity challenge, we need to introduce or strive to and try to go towards IT financial management mastery. And what this means, very simply, is that we need to find mechanisms to include risk, service performance, cost, and value-based decision-making tools and processes, and in the end get to IT portfolio management. We cannot make IT decisions in isolation. We need to understand how those different services work together and how all these factors contribute towards and help us to make decisions. Lastly, we can only do so if we have a defined business IT architecture, which is a fancy word for saying that we need a high-level view of the business technology architecture to foster broad involvement in IT decision-making. So instead of IT talking about bits and bytes, drive space and CPU cycles, and business talking about strategies, we need to find the common ground where these two different groups in the business can talk about technology concepts and talk in the same language. Without this common foundation, there is just no way that we're going to bring these two camps together. And then lastly, the no alternatives challenge forces us into a process of ongoing improvement. We have to realize that attainment of relevant IT is a moving goalpost. Each iteration evolves the foundational capabilities below and puts us into a better position to tackle the next step. So it doesn't matter where you start. You may start with strategic IT, organizational maturity, or any of the other components. What is important is to start, to gain the benefits, to move on and figure out what is the next step, and to really over time take what we've previously seen as a negative spiral or negative feedback loop and convert that into a positive feedback loop. So on the left hand side on this slide, you see the current reality tree that we talked about at length previously, and the critical problem at the bottom where many investment operational IT decisions do not advance business goals. We have discussed how relevant IT concepts in overcoming the challenges that we talked about that sit below this critical problem in the core conflict. When they are overcome, this will turn into a desired effect where investment and operational IT decisions increasingly advance business goals. As soon as we start seeing the quality of decision making improve, we will start seeing a ripple effect through the rest of the current reality tree where some of those complaints are starting to turn into positive scenarios, where in the end people will be much more appreciated. The processes will not be bypassed because we know they work. People will not leave a lot. The risk to the business not increase. I mean, I can go on. It all starts with trying to make better IT decisions. Now, what are the next steps? Firstly, very important, and I would like to warn you, you have to scrutinize the analysis and the conclusions reached. They may not apply to your business. If the analysis, however, does apply and you want to resolve the problem, take the first step and adopt a strategic IT mindset. Involve IT in strategic planning sessions. You will be amazed at how many of your decisions will turn out differently if you just have the input of a qualified technical person at an early stage. Since we cannot develop relevant IT on our own and need the feedback of all the IT people and vendors out there, we encourage you to become part of our LinkedIn Relevant IT group. In here, we try to discuss the common problems, talk about the solutions that we are trying to find for those problems, and really, over time, make sure that all of us gain through this approach. In addition, I would like to encourage you to watch out for more relevant IT insights as we are developing this framework. Now, although we are ahead of many of our customers in implementation of relevant IT, we also know that we haven't yet figured out all the steps along the way. So as we are refining our understanding of what needs to be done, we are going to share our insights. To summarize the key points. Firstly, the IT industry is broken, and I hope I've given you enough evidence to understand why I would say so. Secondly, the business IT divide is the root cause of many doubtful decisions and undesirable effects. This is the core conflict that I talked about that causes us to make many wrong or suboptimal IT business decisions. The relevant IT framework approach tackles the business IT divide and provides practical yet generic guidance to SMEs. Fourthly, And lastly, and most importantly, reducing the business IT divide over time will increase the chances for successful IT projects. This brings me to the end of this slideshow. I wish you a very good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.